4 or 5 core principles. That's very good. Because that is pretty much exactly what we're going to do now. I would like to divide, not the people in the room, but divide the group in 4 smaller units to make it more efficient, to allow room to experiment. And you're all familiar with the Declaration of Rome from a couple of weeks ago. You might agree or disagree with the stuff that is in there, but what makes my life a lot easier is that there were 4 areas that the European Union wants to, well, work in and wants to change things. And that was, on the one hand, that is security on borders. The second one is market and the euro. Then we have social Europe, whatever that means, and being strong globally. And these are 4 points I would like to discuss with you, or better to say, I would like you to discuss now. So we would like to divide the room in 4. I need 4 volunteers. That's 1. Could you come up to me, please? We have 1. If I don't have volunteers, I will make you a volunteer. Chris. Natalia, please. And 1 more. Always think about being a volunteer is better than being a forced volunteer. One of the students. Good. Fantastic. But there is no point sitting in front. I would like just all of you to very quickly introduce yourself with 2 words, and then I will decide which topic you're going to take.
Hello, I'm Vaidotas. I'm from Lithuania, and I'm one of the students here.
Christopher Lingle, Professor of Economics.
Gordon Kerr, specialist in the black arts of banking.
Natalia from Ukraine that is desperate to get in the EU because it's supposed to save the country from whatever is happening in it.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to do, we're going to divide a group now and we do something that's a bit of a differentiation of the World Café. Everybody familiar with that? The technique? No? Good. So I will explain it to you. We will have 4 groups that will be all led by 1 person here in front. These are our dear facilitators and rapporteurs. Meaning, 1 of you will each get 1 of the topics I was just mentioning. And you will be sitting on a table in a corner, and you will be receiving your guests in your little World Café. And you will be discussing that topic from a liberal, libertarian, conservative standpoint. You will collect the ideas, how to shape that in our views. What can happen in Europe? Do we need Europe for something like that? Can the member states, can the smaller units do that better? And what I need you to do is steer the discussion, keep people informed about the discussion that have been before that. And finally, be the rapporteurs in the end, where we will have a small discussion about that in the end. For you, you will go to each of those tables in turn. Well, no, you can. Okay, table is a figurative term. We do corners. Let's say we do 1 corner over there, 1 corner over here. You can stand. You will find your way. I believe you will do it in a spontaneous order. I'm very sure about that. You will migrate from 1 group to another, leading all the discussions, discussing each and every topic. And after you finished all the discussions, you will come back here in the room, and the rapporteurs will give the gist of what has been discussed in all 4 different groups. So, again, in a nutshell. These 4 will stay on a table in the corner or whatever. These 4 will lead the same discussion 4 times with different groups. You will be divided in 4 groups and will go from 1 table to another and make sure that you have covered all the topics. Please, you don't have to go in the same groups over and over again. Just pick the order you want. Just make sure that there are always enough people in 1 group to actually have a discussion and not too many, so we actually can have a discussion in that group. Per table, 15 minutes.
minutes per topic as well. So we have
So
times 15.
4 times 15 minutes. I also would like to urge you to be good timekeepers and to say shush when you are done with the 15 minutes. Any more questions? Yes, we can. Okay, then we start at 22:11. Please, you find a corner, a table, whatever, and you find
Strong globally. So basically, my topic covers all of them. Yeah.
Security and order, social Europe, economy in the euro.
Okay, so I would like you a variety of topics. I always enjoy that. I don't know about you. Did you like it? Yes? Good, good. So, I would now do the following. I would ask one rapporteur after the other come forth to just present in a couple of minutes the discussions. What has been discussed, where were the points that you agreed on, where were disagreements, what were the differences between the different group discussions, were there any conclusions you reached, and for each rapporteur I give you 1 or 2 questions to ask them very briefly, and remind yourself, a question is a sentence where you want to gain some knowledge from, and it has a question mark at the end, just for you to know that. So, as my old friend Chris is here, I would ask you to come forward, maybe do it here, to say a word or two about the discussion.
Okay. So, as you all know, we try to interpret the declaration relating to the euro and the economy and how we would communicate to the leaders of the European Union within the context of our own viewpoints, how to introduce greater concern for human liberty and personal dignity. Okay. Now, it seems that one of the fundamental issues relates to currency, the euro in particular. At least in one group, many people wanted to discuss the primary benefits of the euro, especially to a small country like Montenegro. So I think from that perspective, one could see that the euro is an offer for greater monetary stability because it's controlled by an outside force, and it's you're relinquishing control over the currency from irresponsible politicians and local central bankers that would inflate the currency. So, but I think that overlooks the larger problem. What I believe we see with the euro is that it's a political instrument, and the political ambitions become more important than the economic effects of the euro. So that in order to sustain the euro, large economic costs might be imposed on the group of Europe. So, but looking at the euro as a political instrument rather than an economic tool to promote the overall interests of the community creates a number of problems. So the solutions that were offered, for example, were competing currencies, ending legal tender, that is, legal tender being a mandatory obligation to pay debts and taxes in the official currency, which in this case would be the euro. So it would allow, by ending legal tender, it would allow individuals and businesses to be able to determine whether they would accept a different currency that would compete with the euro to decide what was in their best economic interest. Okay, and so, of course, another statement related to technological innovation. So what was brought up there, of course, were cryptocurrencies as a possible solution or alternative there. a great deal of discussion about deregulation, that economic growth and in the European region is it's perceived that the economic growth is being dampened by heavy regulations, especially on small and medium-sized enterprises, and high tax rates. So again, we got into the discussion of tax competition as an alternative to the tax harmonization that is being imposed on the European community, in cahoots with the OECD, by the way. So the OECD is a great promoter of tax harmonization, which is interesting and ironic because no one that works for the OECD pays taxes. And most European, the Eurocrats, I think, also don't pay taxes. So their interests in harmonizing taxes at a very high rate have no personal impact. So that's just an interesting aside. There was some discussion about experimental zones, perhaps direct democracy as a way of dealing with some of these issues. But what we need to find, and I think what both Barbara and Daniel are talking about, we need to find, is there a mechanism within the European Union that will really lead to these changes? You know, is it a public choice nightmare? Or is there actually, maybe that's where we begin. Where are those mechanisms? Where are those touch points? Where do we actually get in so we can smuggle in these ideas to get some of these changes through? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Is there any reaction or question? Yes, yes, no? Perfect. Federico.
Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Just one thing, which fiat currency is not a political instrument? Fiat currency is not a political instrument.
I think that was a rhetoric question. Really? You think so? Okay, next one. Any volunteer from the three of you? Yeah. Good.
How long have I got?
4 or 5 minutes.
And I'm just summarising what group.
Absolutely.
You think I've been drinking. Well, I've come away from the session being delighted that I had this topic because it was the subject I'd understood least of all, and sounded very vague. In the first group, we started, really probably my mistake in leading down this path, talking about UK Brexit and the social chapter and thinking about this kind of social Europe being all about employment rights and laws and paternity obligations on fathers. But we rapidly came to the conclusion that all of this was going to lead to more and more suppression of individual liberty. One of the best suggestions I thought that came out of the group was John from Prague's suggestion that one way to attack this as think tanks, we're trying to come up with a policy that we could try to promote amongst all think tanks in Europe. One way to attack this would be to just allow it to happen, talk about it as it happens, and encourage governments to go along with this, because in a way they would provide a platform for top-down failure. Allow people to try to do this, and hence, John argued, we'll end up with a sort of classical liberalism result via this failure. The second group quickly came to the conclusion that although the terms sound very nice, they'll be used as a cudgel with which to beat people up at some point. Again, I asked, how should we encourage all the think tanks in Europe to come up with a kind of principle to attack this very pervasive expansion of EU government powers? And I thought Kent came up with a very good approach of encouraging all think tanks to focus on evaluating every policy from the perspective of individual rights, because individual rights should always trump collective rights. We should examine society, he said, via an individual methodology. You're naturally endowed with the right to earn a living as opposed to have an income. In the third group, Alexander quickly picked up that this meant a government programme for each specific word in that wordy and fairly meaningless paragraph. And we should really encourage a policy throughout Europe of kind of outright hostility. We should should encourage think tanks to rip that paragraph apart, word by word, comma by comma, and point out that for every suggestion of a government program, that will just lead to more bad results, and that there's a better free market solution to each one. Eamon pointed out that this really is, this whole chapter, the third paragraph of the Rome Declaration is the essence of Europe itself. It's all the big structural funds, it's all the way that Greece continues to embrace EU membership and the euro, because despite the austerity on one level, they're getting huge grants that aren't being reported very well in the UK as the Brexit debate went ahead. New roads, highways, and all that kind of good stuff. And the fourth group was, really kind of a lot of very young people who are puzzled by what this meant going forward, and didn't really disagree very much. I've left my fourth page here. The main point that came out of the fourth group was that we wanted to encourage more national objection to some of these policies, because they're being operated in a conflicted way anyway. I thought Alicia made some very good points that areas like migration, taxes and so forth, there are very different ways that these are being implemented at national levels throughout Europe in any event. So it's something that, although the battle of ideas, she said, was difficult, it goes beyond things like tax reduction and really just general support of the idea of supporting a pan-European think tank principle of urging a focus on individual rights.
Okay, great, thank you very much, fantastic job. Any question or comment to this?
Finished.
Yeah, that was a very good summary, but the one thing that was especially about that group was that the wording already looked so much like a huge compromise inside the EU. It's very difficult to attack, because it's like trying to nail jelly to a wall, because there's everything and nothing in that whole campaign.
Well, I would respond, if I may, very briefly, because I think everybody fails to appreciate just how grinding this crisis has been. 10 years since Northern Rock collapsed in 2007. You have to get this into elevator pitches. All you young people will never succeed in life unless you can say things very, very briefly indeed. This all comes down to money printing. If there was some change in the currencies, which I think we're fairly near, it's like the end of the turkey's life if you read Taleb's Black Swan. It gets nurtured by the farmer every day, then some point in December, things are going to change. I think we're near that point now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, what I had in mind, and regarding to the text that you read, it's, first of all, we need to recognize that because it's a result of compromise and negotiations and all that, so center-left, center-right parties must have agreed on that. It's very generic, but knowing the language of the EU, it automatically opens Pandora's box for new regulation, new subsidies, new whatever. So if we take an approach like Henry Hazlitt did when he wrote an entire book going verse by verse to deconstructing Keynes, but instead of saying what you will do, although you not stated is wrong and this and that, present a positive agenda from a free market point of view, because the goals that are there are attainable by free markets. We know we have specific examples throughout the world, and point that out in a policy forum, in a policy perspective in Brussels and in nation states as well.
I mean, I think, Bob, if I could address Barbara directly, I think it's an outstanding idea, Alexander. I mean, I'm really glad to be invited here, because I've learned a lot from this. Everybody in Britain, despite the, in general, pro-Brexit talk coming from a small number of the media outlet, the majority being kind of people regretting Brexit, like the Financial Times, The Economist, and the BBC. But there seems to me to be quite a lot of value to what you say, that there's a job here to be done for somebody to write a book on that one paragraph, very, very positive on every single nuance, and try to work out exactly how the EU is likely to behave on each issue.
Thank you very much.
So my topic is a bit more general and far-reaching, so I might hijack some points from other speakers. Our topic that was discussed is how to make the EU great again. And basically the things that we agreed on are that the Rome Declaration is wrong because the EU is not as unified as it says it is, because we faced a number of obstacles when we're discussing the issues. Issue number one, we decided that free trade is the answer to everything when it comes to promoting European values, which should be free market values, as we discussed, and to establishing new partnerships, to keeping the already existing partnerships. It's all about the free trade. How do we see it? The EU bureaucrats make it more difficult for free trade to exist. That's why there should be introduced time caps on how long it can take to reach agreements, to establish relations, and so on. Then, so free trade should be promoted, deregulated. We should be looking into connecting cities, not just countries. Then we should eliminate import taxes, any tariffs, revise the already existing agreements, and trade with anyone. We had a couple of good points when it comes to that. Trade with anyone who wants to trade with us. Trade with anyone who is not a country, so who is private. And trade with anyone who sticks to contracts and respects property. Then talking about e-commerce, we think that VAT should be paid in the country you buy from, not in your own country. Then very helpful for establishing new partnerships is not bombing those countries and cities you want to establish them with. And it's very important to get rid of so-called Poverty Inc. All right, so just let these countries have access to your free market. Don't intrude. Then the next point is no manipulating the market. Removing disincentives is the best way to give incentives to business, especially when it comes to the climate policy. It was one of the points we discussed, and we agreed that climate change exists, that we shouldn't Donald Trump it, but there's very little we as the EU can do. So we should rely on free markets and companies who work with new technology. There was a difference. Some people thought that the incentive should be tax liberalization for those companies. Some said no, because companies will get it figured out. And then when it comes to being stronger defensively, which is important for the EU globally, A, use NATO as a shield. B, we had a discussion between the policing activity and the army activity. So should nation states do the police activity, and should the EU as a whole take care of mutual defense? So we have differences, because some people said it should be more centralized, some people said it should be more decentralized. So we haven't reached an agreement. And there was a suggestion to get rid of draft, because professional armies are a better and cheaper option. So that's all from us.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions directly? Comments or questions? 3, 2, 1. No?
Thank you.
So we discussed the topic of security and borders, and that was very difficult because you had to first define what's security and what are the borders of Europe, because we are not clear what's Europe in the end. So So there we started like, to look for the frame. The second problem was that here, like they are talking about extended border security and migration policy, but they are not talking about internal policy within the EU or external policy. So what they have sent in the Roman Declaration is very unclear. So we had to look at different aspects. Therefore, the results weren't that good. However, what we have seen throughout all of the groups that most of the libertarians are for sure for open borders, so that's something really great. So within the EU, we decided that we want to keep the free movement of people as it is now, because it is beneficially. However, on the external migration from people outside of the EU to the EU, we have seen different, very different opinions. However, for people who want to work in the EU, basically everybody was for the opportunities to work and to live in the continent. Another topic that we had was self-protection in terms of security. So, of course, most of the people said that we should demolish gun control because we should raise the security for every individual, and yeah, that would maybe increase the safety of the people in the region. And the second thing is that in order to have a certain stability within the borders, we should also help with free trade, as it is the best way to stabilize the markets outside of Europe, and then to have a more stable world in all terms. So yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you very much. Any comments or questions for that presentation? No? Very good. Then, wow. What? Okay.
Just, again, I'd like to go back to my point that I made at the end. It seems to me the beginning point here, because you were talking about the solutions of free markets, of course, we would agree with. Open borders, perhaps most of us certainly would agree with. But where are the entry points to get these ideas into the narrative? The narrative is controlled by the statists. And so we have to find a way somehow into introducing these ideas in a more effective way, because ideas have been around for centuries. This is a real problem. Maybe we start with the question, is the EU immune to these inroads? Or if not, then how do we control the narrative? How do we get the narrative to focus on these things? Because it's clear that free markets will bring about economic growth, that will bring about more health security because we have the means to provide health and so on. So I think this is where, it seems to me, where the beginning point is. Otherwise, the discussion is, you know, we're just an echo chamber in that regard. What do you see as the entry points for us to alter the narrative for the future of the EU? And I want to commend the two younger people for their excellent job.
So we have time for two very short comments.
Well, I think to answer that, Chris, though, I think that the left does have a seat at the table in many of these international organizations. And we need to find a way to get a seat at the table as well, and to provide a countervailing voice that's not being heard right now. Whether it's the OECD or the EU, we need to, if nothing else, elbow our way into the conversation, and it may just require building relationships there. I don't think the OECD in particular is immune to that. They have various portals or channels. We just need to find ways to do that and build relationships so that there is a countervailing voice. Because right now they're only hearing one, and we need to find our way in.
And it's actually possible to find your way in. Last year I was doing a project about decarbonization in transport sector. And at the end of the day, we had very left-leaning activists, guys from the industry on one table. It was the first time ever that they were actually talking to each other and not only about each other. And in the end of the day, the leftists came out saying, oh, well, that was interesting, I didn't know that. And so we started changing mindsets, and that is something we need to do, and engage in discussion, not shy away from them.
I think it came out yesterday also that the EU is such an overbearing, multifaceted octopus that kind of goes into everything because they have such huge taxpayer-funded possibilities. So what we need to focus on is just certain aspects where you can actually attack them. For instance, I just heard the gun rights topic. There, our Czech friends are actually trying to start something for the right to bear arms, more or less, in the EU, counter the new EU firearms directive. But it's individual. I don't know how effective that's going to be, by the way, but still. It is a point where they try to organize, but there are just certain points where we have our strengths, and that way you have to focus on rather than trying to fight windmills left, right, and center, because they just are bringing out so much legislation. It's incredible.
And to, again, point what Chris has said, get out of the echo chamber and that. Get out of the echo chamber.
Chris, that's an excellent question. Essentially, we're discussing theory of change here. How can we get access to that? I always subscribe to the Milton Friedman approach, where what our beliefs are politically inevitable in the long term, and there's a lot of historical background to back that up. The question is, when the opportunity comes, are we going to be ready? And I can't think of a better example. I recently published an article at the Atlas Network website because I was dumbfounded by my own country, Greece, and the way that Greeks, after blaming neoliberalism and free markets for their bankruptcy, electing the worst kind of left-wing populists in their current government, right now, free markets are more popular in Greece than in any time in recent recorded history. The current party that is leading the polls by 18% are running with a campaign message, which is cut spending, cut taxes. And the question is, when we get the opportunity at the European level, will the think tanks, the liberal politicians, the business people, the academics, and let's take the intellectual class defined by Hayek and all that, are they going to be ready to jump in the opportunity, or is it going to be a wasted opportunity like so many others we've had in the past? Yes, it's happening. So I'm an optimist. It's a matter of timing, and we'll get our chance, as Eurosceptics in the UK got their chance and they took advantage of it and they won. I don't know if they're going to be vindicated, but it's a matter of timing. And cultivating the European Resource Bank, the Free Market Roadshow, the work that Barbara does, Lorenzo and ATR and all the think tank people here, the work that we're doing, essentially we're going to get a chance to influence that. The question is, are we going to be ready with the right positioning in the critical sectors that formulate ideas in society?
Thank you very much. We don't have any more time, unfortunately.
One word, and it echoes what you said. Let's be positive,
Thank you.
We will get our chance, we're having our chance, and we're winning. Stop all this defeatist talk about knowing this is because we're not getting through. The centre right is winning. No question about it.
Good. And just echoing again, it is not, what we're doing is not MMA. We have to follow a Tai Chi approach, taking the force and redirecting it. So, having said that, I would like to, please don't punch each other, do that outside. As long as I'm facilitating, please don't fight, physically get out so I can join. So, thank you very much again for the host. You did an amazing job. I would ask you to maybe type down what you've discussed so we actually can use it, and we will use it in the future, because this was just a starting point. To start getting ideas rolling, start discussing, start engage with each other. And I think we did a pretty good job with that, and you can give yourself also a round of applause for that. Yay!
And of course also Daniel managing this, because you obviously... Thank you. We now actually should have been over for lunch for half an hour, so we run over there. Lorenzo will also have a little presentation. We will unite probably 10 minutes later than we should, at 1:40 instead of 1:30. We have the panels in the afternoon, and please be here on time. And